The stars gleamed like silent witnesses to the unfolding drama aboard the Astoria, a medium-sized research vessel drifting at the edge of the Andromeda expanse. Its crew, a mix of humans and aliens, were specialists in xenobiology, exoplanet research, and interstellar diplomacy. On board was Captain Mara Quinn, a seasoned explorer with a knack for finding humor in chaos, and her first officer, Chketh, a towering Revalian with an unsettling number of eyes that could see in infrared. Despite their differences, the pair had navigated countless cosmic oddities together until today. "Explain to me again why my coffee just tried to run away," Mara demanded, staring at the splattered remnants of her mug's contents now pulsing faintly on the floor. "It would appear," Chketh said, his multiple eyes focusing with unnerving precision on the gooey substance, "that the molecular compound of your brew has achieved sentience." "Sentience," Mara echoed, deadpan. "My coffee is alive." As if on cue, the puddle gave a quivering bounce and slithered toward the corner of the room. Mara leapt to block it with a tray. "Containment first, analysis second," she barked. Chketh snatched an empty specimen container from the wall and scooped the quivering blob into it, sealing the lid before it could protest. The crew gathered around as the coffee-turned lifeform wobbled indignantly inside the container. "This is new," muttered Dr. Irva Channa, the ship's xenobiologist. She bent closer to inspect the container, her gills twitching with curiosity. "Understatement of the century," Mara said. "What's the protocol for sentient coffee? Do we negotiate with it, or does it go straight to quarantine?" Before Irva could answer, the lights flickered ominously, followed by the unmistakable hum of the ship's automated voice. "Attention, anomalous life signatures detected across multiple decks. Containment protocols engaged. Manual override required." Mara froze. "Please tell me this isn't related." "It appears to be spreading," Chketh said grimly, his infrared vision tracking faint, erratic heat trails originating from the galley. "Spreading how?" Irva pulled up a holographic interface, her fingers flicking rapidly across the glowing screen. "Well, Captain, it seems your coffee wasn't the only thing that became independent. Reports are coming in of sentient puddles across decks 4 through 7. Some of them are attempting to merge. One appears to have commandeered a cleaning bot." "Of course it has." Mara sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "All right, team. First things first, status check. Is this an internal phenomenon or external interference?" Irva's fingers danced faster over the hologram. "No external energy signatures or breaches detected. This seems to be a spontaneous biophysical anomaly, unique to the ship's environment." "Meaning what, exactly?" Mara asked. "Meaning," Irva said with an unsettling calm, "it's us. Something we've done, or are doing, is causing it." Mara turned toward the rest of the crew. "All right, split into teams. Irva, you and Chketh figure out what sparked this mess. Sensor logs, environmental conditions, chemical reactions, anything that might explain why the ship has suddenly become a nursery for hyper-intelligent beverages. Aster, Kova, monitor the anomalies. We need containment and observation, but do not," she fixed a stern glare on the crew, "engage unless absolutely necessary." The team nodded and scattered like a well-oiled machine, each moving to their stations as the low hum of the ship's alert system persisted in the background. Mara leaned against the console, her brow furrowed as she stared at the shimmering blob now pulsing faintly in its container. It was mesmerizing in an unsettling way, its color shifting between rich coffee brown and a soft amber glow, as if it were cycling through emotions, or phases of thought. "Chketh, humor me," Mara said, her voice low. "Could this be an early-stage intelligence? Like, really early? What if this thing isn't just some accidental mutation?" Chketh adjusted his neural scanner, his infrared eyes glimmering with concern. "If it is a developing intelligence, Captain, we may be obligated to treat it as a sentient being under interstellar law. That's assuming it doesn't turn the entire ship into a living, breathing organism first." Before Chketh could respond, the intercom crackled, and Irva's voice came through. "Captain, you might want to see this." The urgency in her tone sent a shiver down Mara's spine. She gestured for Jketh to follow and sprinted to the biolab, where Irva was bent over a console. Holographic projections floated in the air, displaying chemical analyses, molecular breakdowns, and startling energy signatures. "This can't be right," Irva said, her voice almost a whisper. "It's evolving. Rapidly." Mara frowned. "Define rapidly." "Minutes," Irva replied. "Every analysis we run shows exponential growth in its neural complexity. It's building connections faster than we can track. At this rate..." She hesitated, and Mara stepped closer. "At this rate, what?" Irva turned, her gills pale. "At this rate, it could achieve full sapience in hours, maybe less." Mara stared at the holographic data, her heart pounding. This wasn't just an unusual anomaly, it was a crisis in the making. A sentient organism born from the bowels of their ship, growing smarter by the second? The implications were staggering. "All right," Mara said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We need containment protocols on a ship-wide scale. Irva, can we isolate this thing's growth source?" "We can try, but it's like chasing a fire in a windstorm. Every time we isolate one node, another springs up somewhere else. Then we need to outthink it. If this thing's evolving, it's probably observing us as much as we're observing it. Let's give it something to chew on." Jketh tilted his head, his infrared eyes narrowing. "You're suggesting we distract it?" "Exactly. We keep it occupied while we figure out a way to neutralize, or communicate with, it. If it's evolving intelligence, we might be able to reason with it before it becomes a threat. And if reasoning fails?" Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we make sure it can't spread beyond this ship." The intercom crackled again, this time with Astor's panicked voice. "Captain, we've got a problem on Deck 5. One of the anomalies just absorbed a maintenance drone. It's replicating machinery now." Mara swore under her breath. "How contained is it?" "Not very. It's adapting to the containment fields, no idea how much time we've got." "Understood. Hold position but do not engage until I give the order." Turning back to Irva and Jketh, Mara clenched her fists. This just turned into a race. We figure this out, or we don't leave this ship alive. For a moment, the weight of her words hung in the air, and then the team sprang into action. Time was against them, and the stakes had never been higher. Whatever this anomaly was, it was evolving faster than they could comprehend, and they were its unwitting creators. As the Astoria sailed through the silent void, the pulsating glow of its newly awakened inhabitants spread through the decks, a silent challenge to the ingenuity and resilience of its crew. The Astoria was alive with urgency. The once calm hum of the ship had turned into an orchestra of alarms, rapid footsteps, and crackling intercoms. On Deck 5, the anomaly that had absorbed the maintenance drone was growing faster than anyone could have anticipated. What had started as a coffee puddle was now an amalgamation of shimmering liquid and mechanized parts, pulsating with an otherworldly rhythm. Captain Mara Quinn paced the bridge, her mind racing through scenarios. Each update over the intercom felt like another nail in their collective coffin. "We've cordoned off decks 5 through 7, reported Kova, her voice tight with tension. But the anomaly's tendrils are starting to test the barriers. They're probing, like it's learning the ship's layout." "Of course it is," Mara muttered, rubbing her temples. "Irva, tell me you've got something." In the biolab, Dr. Irva Chana worked feverishly over the console. Her gills flared with every frustrated exhale as she ran test after test. Beside her, Jketh monitored the anomaly's energy patterns, his expression unreadable as his multiple eyes flicked across the data. "We've identified a catalyst," Irva said, her voice cracking over the intercom. "The anomaly is feeding on the ship's plasma conduits. It's using the energy to power its evolution. That explains why it's spreading so fast," Jketh added. "If it reaches the primary plasma reactor, the entire ship could," he hesitated. "Explode?" Mara finished grimly. "Yeah, not ideal. How do we stop it?" Irva's voice faltered. We don't know yet. It's adapting to everything we throw at it. Standard containment fields, temperature extremes, even ionizing radiation, none of it slows it down. Great, Mara said, her tone laced with sarcasm. We've accidentally created an invincible goobot. Love that for us. The intercom crackled again, this time with Astor's voice. Captain, it's worse. The anomaly isn't just growing, it's starting to communicate. It hijacked a comm panel on Deck 6. Mara stiffened. What do you mean, communicate? It spoke, Astor stammered. Well, not exactly spoke, but it transmitted a series of tones and visual patterns through the panel. Like it's trying to talk. Mara's eyes darted toward the nearest console. Patch me through. I want to see this for myself. A moment later, the bridge's main screen lit up with a strange sequence of flashing lights and rhythmic tones. The pattern was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, and it sent a chill down Mara's spine. It's using a binary-like structure, Chkath observed from the biolab. Highly efficient. It's trying to establish a form of language. Establish language or manipulate us. Mara countered. Irva's voice chimed in. It could be both. If it's intelligent, and it clearly is, it might be testing our responses, trying to gauge whether we're a threat or an opportunity. Mara stared at the screen, the rhythmic pulses quickening. All right, she said finally. If it wants to talk, let's talk. Chkath, can you devise a response using its binary structure? Chkath nodded, already working at the console. It'll take a moment, but I can try. We'll need to tread carefully, this thing is evolving faster than anything we've ever encountered. A misstep could provoke it. Just make it happen, Mara said. As Chkath worked, Mara turned her attention back to the ship's layout. If the anomaly was feeding on the plasma conduits, they needed to cut off its energy supply. But doing so could cripple the ship, leaving them adrift in the void. Kova, Mara called over the intercom. I need options. Is there a way to isolate the plasma network feeding decks 5 through 7 without shutting down the whole ship? Kova's reply was hesitant. We can try rerouting power through auxiliary conduits, but the system isn't designed for that kind of load. We'd be risking a cascade failure. Mara clenched her fists. Do it anyway. Buy us time. Aye, Captain. As Kova and the engineering team scrambled to reroute power, Chkath completed his response to the anomaly. Ready, Captain, he said. The message translates to a basic query, who are you? Mara nodded. Send it. The binary message was transmitted, and the crew held their breath. For a moment, there was no response. Then, the lights on the screen pulsed in a slow, deliberate pattern. It's responding, Chkath said, his voice tinged with awe. The pattern resolved into a series of symbols and tones that Irva quickly analyzed. It's identifying itself, she said. The translation is rough, but it seems to call itself. Collective. Collective, Mara repeated. That's ominous. The anomaly's message continued, and Irva's expression darkened as she deciphered it. It's claiming that it's here to assimilate knowledge, she said. It sees us as part of its learning process. Assimilate knowledge or assimilate us? Mara asked pointedly. Both, potentially, Chkath said. If it's feeding on plasma and merging with machinery, it could be trying to incorporate everything on this ship into itself. Mara's jaw tightened. Not on my watch. As the anomaly's presence continued to expand, the crew's situation grew increasingly desperate. The auxiliary power rerouting bought them some time, but the strain on the ship's systems was already apparent. Lights flickered sporadically, and the hum of the engines grew erratic. Irva's voice broke through the chaos. Captain, I've identified a potential weak point. The anomaly's neural patterns are centralized in its original node, the coffee puddle. If we can disrupt its connection to that node, we might be able to stop its growth. That's a big if, Mara said. How do we disrupt it? Irva hesitated. It would require an intense burst of electromagnetic energy, enough to fry its neural network. But doing so could also overload the ship's systems. It's a high-risk move. Mara took a deep breath, weighing the options. The anomaly was growing smarter, faster, and more dangerous with every passing moment. They couldn't afford to wait. "Do it," she said. "Prepare the EMP burst. We'll deal with the fallout later." As Irva and Chketh worked to configure the EMP, the anomaly's binary messages grew more aggressive. The lights on the screen pulsed in erratic, dissonant patterns, and the tones took on a menacing edge. "It knows what we're planning," Chketh said grimly. Mara squared her shoulders. "Then let's move fast." "Irva, Chketh, how long until the EMP is ready?" 5 minutes, Irva replied. "We might not have 5 minutes, Kova interjected. The anomaly just breached Deck 8. It's heading for the primary plasma reactor." Mara's heart pounded. "Divert all available personnel to slow it down. We need every second." As the crew scrambled to hold the line, Mara couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of disaster. The Astoria had faced its share of challenges, but this was unlike anything they'd ever encountered. The anomaly wasn't just a threat, it was an enigma, a puzzle they had to solve before it consumed them all. And time was running out. The corridor leading to the reactor bay pulsed with a dim, flickering light. Tendrils of the anomaly slithered along the walls, shimmering and coiling like a living, breathing storm. The crew of the Astoria scrambled to hold the line, armed with improvised containment tools, plasma cutters, magnetic netting, and repurposed maintenance drones. "Keep it back!" Kova shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. She swung a modified ion disruptor, severing one of the anomaly's tendrils. It recoiled with a shriek, but 2 more surged forward in its place, tangling with a containment drone and pulling it apart like a toy. "Captain," Astor's voice crackled over the intercom, "we can't hold it much longer. It's adapting too fast." In the biolab, Mara leaned over Irva's shoulder, watching the progress bar for the EMP configuration creep toward completion. "How much longer?" she demanded. 2 minutes, Irva said, sweat dripping down her face. Her gills flared with each breath as she worked to calibrate the pulse. "Any sooner and we risk a misfire." "We might not have 2 minutes, Mara growled. Chketh, standing nearby, adjusted his neural scanner and frowned. "The anomaly is accelerating its assimilation process. If it reaches the reactor, it could trigger a catastrophic overload." Mara slammed her fist against the console. "Then we stop it here. Irva, keep working on the EMP, Chketh, you're with me. We're taking the fight to it." The two raced down the corridor, the sounds of battle growing louder with every step. The acrid scent of burnt circuits and seared metal filled the air as they reached the reactor bay entrance. What they saw stopped them cold. The anomaly had grown into a monstrous mass, its liquid metal surface shimmering with iridescent hues. It pulsated like a heartbeat, its tendrils burrowing into the walls and conduits, feeding on the ship's power. In its center, a glowing core pulsed with a menacing, almost hypnotic light. "It's trying to access the reactor's control interface," Chketh said, his voice tense. "If it succeeds, then it's game over," Mara finished. She turned to Chketh. "We need to slow it down. Hit it hard and fast, keep it distracted until Irva gets the EMP ready." Chketh nodded, raising his plasma cutter. "Understood." The two charged into the bay, weapons blazing. Mara aimed for the tendrils connecting the anomaly to the reactor's control panel, severing them with precision shots. The creature screeched, its liquid surface rippling violently as it withdrew the severed limbs and lashed out with others. Chketh moved with practiced efficiency, his multiple eyes giving him an almost preternatural awareness of the creature's movements. He dodged a tendril swipe and countered with a burst from his plasma cutter, carving a molten line across the anomaly's surface. "It's resisting," Chketh said. "Our attacks are barely slowing it down." "We don't need to kill it," Mara replied, gritting her teeth. "We just need to buy time." The anomaly seemed to sense their strategy. Its core pulsed brighter, and its tendrils multiplied, surging toward the two with relentless aggression. Mara dodged one tendril only to be caught by another, which coiled around her leg and yanked her off her feet. "Captain!" Keth shouted. Mara twisted, aiming her plasma cutter at the tendril. She fired, the beam slicing through the liquid metal limb and freeing her. She scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. "This thing's learning faster than we can adapt," she said. "We need backup." As if in answer, the intercom crackled. "EMP is ready," Irva's voice called out. "But we need you to lure it away from the reactor core. The blast will disable the entire area, it's too risky to detonate near the reactor." Mara scanned the room, her mind racing. "Understood. Keth, help me draw it toward the maintenance bay. Irva, get that EMP prepped for remote detonation." Keth nodded, his plasma cutter at the ready. "Let's give it something to chase." The two began a tactical retreat, firing at the anomaly and taunting it as they moved. The creature screeched and surged after them, its bulk tearing through the walls and floor as it pursued. "Come on, you overgrown science experiment!" Mara shouted, firing another shot. "Let's see what you've got." The anomaly roared, its tendrils lashing out with ferocious speed. Mara and Keth ducked and weaved, their movements precise and coordinated. They reached the maintenance bay just as the anomaly began to close in, its massive bulk filling the corridor behind them. "Irva, now!" Mara yelled into her comm. The EMP detonated with a blinding flash of light and a deafening hum. The force of the blast knocked Mara and Keth off their feet, and the anomaly let out a keening wail as its form rippled violently. Its tendrils spasmed, retracting as the glowing core dimmed. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the emergency lights flickered on, casting the bay in a dim red glow. "Did it work?" Mara asked, coughing as she pushed herself to her feet. Keth scanned the anomaly with his neural scanner. Its neural activity has ceased. "It's dormant." Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Good. Let's make sure it stays that way." As the crew regrouped, Irva and her team began the delicate task of securing the anomaly's remains. The glowing core had fractured, its light extinguished, and the liquid metal tendrils lay limp and inert. "We'll need to study this thing carefully," Irva said. "There's so much we still don't understand about how it came to be." Mara nodded, exhaustion evident in her posture. "Study it all you want, as long as it doesn't wake up." The crew's relief was palpable, but Mara knew their ordeal wasn't over yet. The anomaly had tested their limits, and its potential implications were staggering. As she gazed at the dormant creature, Mara couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Something about the anomaly felt unfinished, as if its story, and their own, was far from over. The aftermath of the EMP detonation left the Astoria eerily quiet. For the first time since the anomaly's rapid evolution, the ship's usual hum of systems returning to normal seemed almost unnatural. Yet the crew moved quickly, their exhaustion palpable, but their determination unwavering. "Status report," Captain Mara Quinn said, her voice raspy as she entered the bridge. She rubbed a bruise on her shoulder, a souvenir from her tumble during the EMP blast. Keth's infrared eyes scanned his console. The anomaly's activity has ceased entirely. The core is dormant, and the tendrils show no signs of regeneration. "Good," Mara said. "Let's not give it a reason to wake up." "Irva, how's containment coming along?" In the biolab, Irva's fingers flew over the console as she monitored the sealed containment field housing the remains of the anomaly. The fractured core floated in a suspension chamber, surrounded by layers of energy fields designed to prevent any interaction with the environment. "It's secure for now," Irva replied over the comms. "But Captain, I have to warn you, the EMP didn't destroy its neural structure. It's intact, just inactive." "Inactive is fine by me," Mara said. "But keep monitoring it. If it so much as twitches, I want to know." The crew's relief was short-lived. A sudden, sharp chime echoed through the ship, followed by the automated voice of the ship's AI. "Warning, residual energy surge detected in primary plasma reactor. Investigating anomaly." Mara's blood ran cold. Residual energy surge? Irva, please tell me that's not what I think it is. Irva's response came after a tense pause. The anomaly left traces in the plasma conduits. They're activating sporadically, creating instability in the system. If we don't stabilize it, the reactor could explode, Chkath finished grimly. Mara swore under her breath. We just can't catch a break, can we? Captain, Chkath said, we may still have an opportunity. If we can isolate the energy traces in the conduits, we might be able to purge them manually. Might doesn't fill me with confidence, Mara muttered. It's either that or eject the reactor, Chkath said flatly. Mara's jaw tightened. Ejecting the reactor means no power. No power means no life support, no shields, and no way home. We'd be adrift in Andromeda with nothing but hope and bad luck. Then manual purging it is, Chkath said. Mara activated the ship-wide comm. Listen up, everyone. We've got one last hurdle to clear. The anomaly left traces of its energy in the plasma conduits, and it's destabilizing the reactor. We're going to purge it manually. Irva, Chkath, you're with me. Aster and Kova, maintain monitoring on the core and keep an eye on containment. Let's move. The reactor bay was a war zone of flickering lights and sparking conduits. Tendrils of residual energy pulsed through the walls, their erratic patterns eerily similar to the anomaly's previous movements. We'll need to use the plasma regulators to channel the surges into the purge module, Irva explained, her hands trembling as she held a diagnostic tablet. But the system wasn't designed for this kind of operation. If the regulators overload, we'll have bigger problems, Mara finished. Got it. Chkath, you're on regulator control. Irva, keep an eye on energy readings. I'll handle the purge sequence. Chkath nodded and moved to the regulator panel, his fingers deftly adjusting the controls. Irva monitored the reactor's energy output, her gills flaring with every spike in the readings. Mara took her position at the purge module, her hands hovering over the controls. All right, team. On my mark. As they worked, the ship's structure groaned, a deep, unsettling sound that resonated through the walls. The residual energy wasn't just destabilizing the reactor, it was spreading. Captain, the traces are trying to reform, Irva said, panic creeping into her voice. It's like they're trying to reconnect to the core. Then let's make sure they don't get the chance, Mara said. Chkath, redirect the surges to the purge module. Irva, prepare to amplify the containment fields around the core. The team worked in tense synchronization. The air in the reactor bay grew heavy with heat and static as the conduits glowed with residual energy. Mara's hands flew over the controls, initiating the purge sequence just as a tendril of energy surged toward the main regulator. Watch out! Chkath shouted, diving to intercept the tendril. His plasma cutter flashed, severing the surge before it could reach the panel. Nice save, Mara said, her voice tight. Don't thank me yet, Chkath replied. The system's nearing critical load. Mara's eyes flicked to the purge module's progress bar. It was agonizingly slow. Come on, she muttered under her breath. The ship shuddered violently as another surge coursed through the conduits. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and the hum of the reactor grew into a deafening roar. Captain, we're out of time. Irva shouted. Mara's gaze darted between the purge module and the unstable reactor. We need one last push. Chkath, reroute all auxiliary power to the purge system. That'll leave us vulnerable, Chkath warned. Do it, Mara ordered. Chkath complied, and the lights dimmed as power surged toward the purge module. The progress bar jumped forward, nearing completion. Almost there, Mara said, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. With a final, ear-splitting hum, the purge module activated. A brilliant wave of energy shot through the conduits, vaporizing the residual traces in an instant. The reactor bay fell silent, save for the steady hum of a now stabilized reactor. It's done, Irva said, collapsing against the wall in relief. Mara slumped over the controls, her breath ragged. Good work, everyone. The crew regrouped on the bridge, their exhaustion giving way to a cautious sense of triumph. The anomaly's remains were secure, the reactor was stable, and the Astoria had survived. What's our next move? Chkath asked, his tone as calm as ever. Mara leaned back in her chair, a wry smile on her face. We catalog the anomaly, file a report, and make sure no one ever drinks sentient coffee again. The crew laughed, a welcome sound after the chaos they'd endured. Irva's voice cut through the moment of levity. Captain, I've been analyzing the core. There's something you should see. Mara frowned and joined Irva at the console. The holographic display showed a faint pulse emanating from the fractured core. It's still alive? Mara asked, her voice sharp. Not quite, Irva said. It's dormant, but it's still thinking. Whatever this thing is, it's not just a biological anomaly. It's a new form of life. Mara stared at the display, a mix of awe and unease in her eyes. Let's keep it that way. Lock it down, double the containment fields, and set a course for the nearest research station. Let's see if they want to inherit our little problem. As the Astoria sailed toward safety, Mara couldn't help but reflect on the ordeal. The anomaly had tested them in ways they'd never imagined, forcing them to rely on their creativity, courage, and teamwork. You know, Mara said, turning to Chkath, for a sentient puddle of coffee, it sure gave us a run for our money. Chkath's eyes glimmered with amusement. Perhaps it's a lesson in humility. Mara chuckled, the tension finally easing. Or a lesson to stick with tea. The crew laughed again, the sound carrying through the ship as the stars stretched endlessly before them.